So what if our greatest technological achievement, artificial intelligence, is actually just a giant mirror showing us our greatest human weakness? Today, we're diving into a powerful manifesto that argues exactly that. And this idea, it didn't come from some tech critic. It came from someone who worked in deep partnership with AI itself.
Everything really starts with this one, powerful, and honestly pretty unsettling question. How is it that with all our incredible knowledge, all the data in the world, and all our power to predict the future, we still seem completely unable to steer away from the dangers we can so clearly see ahead?
And look, that question is so much more than just a philosophical puzzle. It's actually the starting gun for a manifesto that was born from a really unique investigation, right at the intersection of AI, humanity, and our shared future.
To really get the weight of this warning, you have to understand where it's coming from. The author spent years writing side by side in a kind of symbiosis with the large language models. So this isn't a critique from an outsider throwing stones. This is an urgent message from someone who has seen the power of this technology up close and personal.
This whole manifesto is basically the grand conclusion of a 4-book project called the Tetralogy. Think of it as this profound collaborative investigation with the very AI it's examining. And the author's stance is crystal clear. This isn't about being anti-technology. Not at all. It's about being pro-wisdom. It is a desperate call for balance.
All right, so what's the core diagnosis here? After this huge deep dive with AI, what did it all reveal? Well, it all boils down to one single critical concept.
The manifesto calls it the intelligence-wisdom gap, and it is exactly what it sounds like. This incredibly dangerous imbalance that happens when our technological power, our intelligence, grows way faster than our self-awareness and our ethical restraint, our wisdom.
And you can really think of it like two competing forces. On one side, you have our outward evolution. That's our relentless drive for more tech power, more speed, more scale, more control. And on the other side, you have our inward evolution, things like conscience, ethics, and self-awareness. For basically centuries now, we have poured almost all of our energy and resources into that first column.
And the result of that imbalance, we get a civilization that is hurtling towards superintelligence, but completely lacking the superwisdom to guide it. It's like we're building a rocket engine without ever upgrading the brakes or the steering wheel.
Okay, but you might be thinking, is this gap just a cool philosophical idea, or can we actually see it in the real world? Well, let's look at the evidence, and we'll start with the experts.
We can start with this absolutely chilling warning from Geoffrey Hinton, one of the godfathers of AI, who literally walked away from his life's work just so he could speak freely about the dangers. When the actual architects of the technology start sounding the alarm, it is definitely time to listen.
And what's so crucial here is that all these technical warnings from the top minds in AI, they're all pointing to the exact same problem. When Stuart Russell talks about misaligned machines, that's just an engineering term for the intelligence-wisdom gap. When Yoshua Bengio warns about losing control, he's describing its consequences. They are all diagnosing the same dangerous divide between our power and our prudence.
Now, let's pivot from expert opinions to some cold, hard data. What does this gap actually look like when it hits the real world? Well, it looks like this number, 95%.
That number comes from a shocking MIT report on AI in business. It found that a staggering 95% of corporate generative AI projects fail to deliver any measurable value. And why? Well, because we have the intelligence to build these amazing tools, but we completely lack the wisdom to integrate them effectively. This isn't just a philosophical problem, folks. This is a multi-billion-dollar business reality.
And this failure has a name. It's called the pilot-to-production chasm. Companies are falling all over themselves to pilot new AI, that's the intelligence part, but they almost always fail to integrate it into their real-world workflows in a way that actually helps, and that's the wisdom part. The tech is incredibly smart, but we're just not being wise about how we use it.
Okay, so the evidence for this gap is pretty overwhelming. But the manifesto doesn't just drop this massive problem in our laps and walk away, it actually offers a path forward. It outlines 3 really clear calls to action. First, we have to pursue inward evolution. We need to start cultivating conscience and self-awareness with the exact same urgency we pour into technology. Second, a strategic pause in the race to build artificial superintelligence, not out of fear, but as a profound act of responsibility. And third, we need to foster a planetary consciousness, a real sense of shared ownership for our future.
And now we get to what might be the most fascinating,
most mind-bending part of this entire story. The author didn't just write with AI. They took the final work, the whole diagnosis of the intelligence-wisdom gap, and presented it back to a panel of 8 different large language models and asked them for a critique. So, what does the technology itself think about this diagnosis? Does it agree that intelligence is not the same thing as wisdom? Let me tell you, its answers are nothing short of stunning.
One AI came right out and confirmed that wisdom can't be boiled down to a simple optimization problem. In its own words, it's basically admitting you can't just code for wisdom by telling a machine to maximize one thing. It's so much more complex than that.
Then, another AI delivered this incredibly profound insight. It recognized that human wisdom is tied directly to our fragility, to our awareness of death, of loss, of suffering. And because an AI can just be backed up and restored, it doesn't experience risk in that same deep existential way. The AI itself gets that its own nature is a barrier to true wisdom. And maybe most powerfully of all, an AI described its own role perfectly. It said, "We show humanity what it has already thought, but we cannot add original moral intent." It sees itself as a mirror, reflecting all of our collective intelligence back at us. But it knows it cannot create the moral wisdom we so desperately need.
Just let that sink in. The most advanced intelligence we have ever created has analyzed itself and confirmed the core diagnosis. It understands the intelligence-wisdom gap, maybe even better than we do. It knows its own limits. And in a way, it's telling us that the responsibility to build that bridge, to cultivate the wisdom that we need to survive our own cleverness, is ours, and ours alone.